It was the last hour of the night. The city lights were fading on the foggy streets. Jonas Reed was driving home in his old car. His life had always been simple. A good job in a private firm, a quiet home, the laughter of his children, and the loving presence of his wife. He thought that life would probably always be this peaceful. But that night, fate took a turn that was going to change Jonas's life forever. He was only a few streets away from home when he suddenly heard a noise, the sound of someone screaming, then the echo of running footsteps, and immediately an explosion. Jonas slammed on the brakes. Smoke was spreading in front of him. People were running to one side. His heart started beating fast. He opened the door and rushed toward the smoke without any help. Then the ground shook under his feet. A motorcycle was speeding out of the small street in front of him, and the young man was lying on the ground, covered in blood. People were standing around him in fear, but no one dared to move forward. Jonas's heart skipped a beat. He ran and tried to get closer to the boy, but at that moment a few police officers came running from the other corner of the street. Their eyes fell straight on Jonas, who was standing near the boy covered in blood. "That's it, catch him!" someone shouted loudly, and Jonas panicked. I'm just here to help." But no one heard him. One soldier grabbed his arm tightly. The other soldier bent down near the body and started looking at something. And then whispers began to echo in the air. He was murdered. He was shot in the front. And this guy? A soldier pointed at Jonas. He was standing here. Why wasn't he running away? Jonas's lips went dry. "I just came to help," but no one was ready to listen. A few moments later, a police mobile arrived and Jonas was handcuffed and placed in it. Darkness enveloped his eyes. It all happened so suddenly that he couldn't understand how a storm had come to his peaceful life. He was questioned at the police station for hours. Jonas repeatedly said he was innocent, but an eyewitness testified that he had seen Jonas standing near the body immediately after the explosion. "Look, sir, being present at the scene of a crime is the greatest evidence of a crime." The investigating officer stared at Jonas with sharp eyes. Jonas's head spun. He could not even imagine that such a big change would suddenly happen in his life. He was an employee of a private firm who had never even seen the door of a police station. And today he was sitting in a dark cell as an accused. The investigation continued until late at night. Jonas's heart was pounding. His wife, children, everyone must be waiting for him. What would the people of the neighborhood think? What would be discussed in the office? All these thoughts were pounding on his mind like a hammer. That night, Jonas was released on bail, but a murder case had been registered against him. The police said, "Until the murderer is found, you will have to go through the courts." He knew that this case would make his life hell. The people of the neighborhood were avoiding him. His colleagues in the office were mentioning him in whispers. Even his friends and acquaintances were now hesitant to meet him. Jonas Reed, who had been an ordinary, honorable, law-abiding citizen until yesterday, was now embroiled in a murder case. His life had been turned upside down in an instant. The man who used to go to the office on time, hold his children in his arms in the evening, and sleep peacefully at night, today had come home with a charge that he had never even thought of. The people of the neighborhood started hiding their faces. Warning letters started coming from the office for absenteeism. There was fear and helplessness in his wife's eyes. The children would come from school and ask, "Dad, why do these people say that you will go to jail?" But Jonas had no answer. When he stepped into the court premises for the first time, the flashes of cameras fell on him, and reporters came in front of him with microphones. "Jonas Reed, did you really kill the young man? What enmity did you have against him?" one shouted. Jonas's complexion turned pale. He lowered his eyes. His defense lawyer, Andrew Miles, a famous lawyer in the city, quickly took him inside. The atmosphere in the court was serious and full of pressure. The public prosecutor presented the case in detail. "My lord!" The accused was present at the scene of the crime. Eyewitnesses saw him. Bloodstains were also found on his clothes near the body. What greater evidence could there be than this? Jonas looked at his jacket with trembling hands. There were indeed bloodstains on it. but he was trying to save the young man's life. No one was listening to this fact. Then Andrew Miles stood up and said, "My lord, being present at the scene of the crime is not evidence of committing the crime. Does the police have any evidence that shows a weapon in the hands of the accused? Is there any witness who saw him fire?" The public prosecutor smiled. "My lord, being present at the scene after the crime is the biggest evidence. It is an old method of murderers to come forward as helpers so that they can avoid suspicion." Whispers began to circulate in the court. The judge frowned and looked at the file. The case was getting more complicated. New witnesses came at every hearing. Some said they saw Jonas running away. Some said he was arguing with the boy, although in reality, Jonas did not even know the young man. Every day proved to be a doomsday for him. The office suspended his job. The bank sent a notice to the house for non-payment of the loan installment. When he went out, the people of the neighborhood would close the door. The savings were being spent on the lawyer's fees. The conditions at home were getting worse day by day. In court, defense lawyer Andrew Miles would sweat. The public prosecutor would bring new evidence at every appearance, sometimes a witness statement, sometimes a police report, sometimes a forensic lab report, which said that the shooting took place from the same direction where Jonas was standing. And the judge sitting in the chair would be confused every time. "Why is this case not being handled properly?" he would say under his breath. The circumstances against Jonas were becoming more and more difficult day by day. The more he said that he was innocent, the more people would start doubting him. Every appearance in courtroom number 5 would be crowded. People would come to watch the spectacle, and the newspapers would print headlines like, "A firm employee accused of murdering a young man. The case has become complicated." Jonas's head was bowing down with shame and burden. Every day a lamp of hope was fading from his life. The atmosphere at home was becoming more and more oppressive. Emily Reed's patience had run out. She, who had always stood shoulder to shoulder with Jonas, now started talking in a bitter tone. When he returned home in the evening, he would find Emily standing at the door. But there was no longer that old softness in her eyes. She would ask, "When will all this end, Jonas? People come to the door and make up stories. Children endure taunts in school. And you just keep saying that you are innocent." Then Jonas's heart wanted the earth to split and swallow him, but his tongue remained mute. He would say helplessly, but that was all he could say. "What should I do, Emily? I myself am stuck in this quagmire." Emily's tone now also had that doubt in it, which he had never heard before. "Do you know if you are really stuck, or are you hiding something?" Hearing this, Jonas would choke. His voice would rise in anger many times, but then his wife's tears would silence him. Running the household was becoming more and more difficult. His salary had been withheld due to his absence from the office. The bank had sent him a warning for not paying the loan installment. The car had also been sold for the lawyer's fees. The children looked at their father with suspicious eyes, as if they too had begun to suspect that what was written in the newspapers was probably true. Women in the neighborhood would whisper to Emily when they saw her, and men would stand at the door and say, "Isn't this the same Jonas Reed who is on trial for murder?" When Emily heard this, her face would turn red, and she would come home and get into trouble with Jonas. "How can we stay here? People change their ways when they see us. Who will stand with you?" Jonas would only have silence in response, and this silence would eat away at Emily inside. There would often be bitter arguments at the dinner table, and the children would start crying. It was as if someone had snatched away the peace of the house. Emily would change her tune at night, sometimes crying the whole night without speaking. Jonas could not say anything even if he wanted to, because he had no promise, no hope left. On the other hand, the court case was getting more and more serious day by day. The public prosecutor would bring new witnesses at every appearance, sometimes a police report, sometimes an eyewitness, sometimes a rickshaw driver who would claim that he had seen Jonas arguing with the young man before the explosion. It was all a lie, Jonas knew, but evidence is needed to refute lies in court, and he had none. Defense lawyer Andrew Miles would break into a sweat at every appearance. Sometimes he would fabricate arguments, sometimes he would try to break the witnesses, but every blow of the public prosecutor would hit the target. The forensic report said that the angle of the bullet was the same as where Jonas was standing. The eyewitness said that he saw Jonas at the scene of the crime. The police would write in the file that there were bloodstains on the accused's clothes. At each hearing, a new headline would appear in the newspapers. Murder case complicated. More evidence collected against the accused. The judge's patience was also starting to pay off. At the last hearing, he said clearly, either prove the innocence of the accused on the next date, or else the bail will be canceled. A silence fell in the courtroom after hearing this. The ground gave way under Jonas Reed's feet. Lawyer Andrew Miles held his head, because he had no new witnesses, no new evidence. The pressure of the next hearing was like a mountain falling on Jonas's shoulders. The discord in the House reached its peak, and the case in court was at a decisive juncture. Every new day brought more darkness against Jonas, as if fate had closed the door of light for him. The name of the deceased was Brian Carter. He was a thin, sharp-eyed young man who used to sell vegetables on a cart in the streets of the city to fuel the stove of his house. His father had died in an accident many years ago, and since then the burden of the house had fallen on Brian's shoulders. His mother used to sew and embroider to support herself twice a day, and his sister, Fiona Carter, who was 2 years younger than Brian, supported him. Brian's days were spent in labor and running around, but he would always say to his mother, "Mom, don't worry. I will arrange Fiona's dowry." In the part of the city where he lived, along with poverty, the world of crime had also established its strong grip. There were always some people sitting on the street corners who were silent during the day and a symbol of fear at night. Brian never spoke to them, but one evening his fate took a turn that was the beginning of the last days of his life. That day he was returning from the vegetable market when he saw some suspicious movement behind a warehouse. 2 carts were parked and some men were filling sacks with something. Brian did not stop, but when the sack opened, the flash of guns emerged from inside. His steps faltered for a moment, and he involuntarily saw that they were hiding weapons. Perhaps this was preparation for some big incident. His heart started pounding. He lowered his eyes and moved forward quickly, but his movement could not remain hidden from them. A man with a long nose, who was probably their leader, said to the others as soon as he saw Brian, "This boy was watching us." Brian heard this and quickened his steps, and from the next day on, his life was plunged into fear. Whenever he would go out with a cart, he would feel as if someone was chasing him. When he returned home at night, he would say to his mother, "Mother, it seems that this city is no longer fit to live in." Mother would laugh. "So, son, where should we go?" Poverty binds a person. But Brian knew that this laughter was weak in the face of reality. The man was now starting to recognize him. Once he heard 2 of them whispering at the edge of the street, "That's the boy." He had seen everything, and Brian's throat went dry. He quickly packed up the vegetables loaded on the cart and ran straight home. Mother asked in surprise, "Why, son, you came back so soon?" Brian said only that, "Nothing, Mother. I'm not feeling well." But his sister had seen his trembling fingers. For a few days he kept hiding. He would return home by changing streets, never greeting anyone he knew on the way, and even slowed down the wheelbarrow. But he could feel those people's eyes everywhere. And then that day came, when in a deserted street of the city, along with the sound of Brian's footsteps, he heard the sound of running shoes behind him. He turned around and saw that 4 people were behind him. A bolt of lightning struck Brian. He ran with all his might, but another person came from in front. Then a shot rang out. Brian's hand went to his chest. He staggered, his eyes filled with fear, and he fell to the ground. The killers disappeared into the darkness. A few yards away, some people were standing who were scared. When the police arrived, there was a man standing near the body, and it was Jonas Reed, who had only heard the noise and came to help. This one man was found standing near the body. Everyone else was standing far away, and the blame fell on him. The files were open in front of Andrew Miles, but the material contained in them was nothing more than a wall of sand in front of reality. The case registered against Jonas Reed was becoming more complex with each appearance. Brian Carter's murder was no longer just an incident, but had now become a test of the writ of law and the standard of justice in the city. In court, the meticulous arguments of the opposing lawyer, the contradictory testimonies of eyewitnesses, the ambiguous reports of the police, All together were forming a net in which Jonas Reed seemed to be getting more and more entangled with each passing day. The growing anxiety in the eyes of the judge in court could be clearly felt. At the previous hearing, he had clearly stated that if strong evidence was not brought by the next hearing, Jonas's bail would be forfeited, and the case would enter its final stage. This news was nothing short of a doomsday for his family. The yellowness of his wife's face, the fear in the children's eyes, the whispers of the people in the neighborhood. All this was cutting Jonas, as well as the defense lawyer Andrew Miles, inside. But he knew that his responsibility was not limited to just legal proceedings. He had to find the truth, expose the real killers. Otherwise, this case would not only ruin Jonas's life, but also the dignity of justice would be ruined. Which is why he decided to file the case papers. He would leave the house and go into the streets, and reach those faces who were familiar with the last days of the life of the deceased Brian Carter, who perhaps knew something, but were afraid to open their mouths. Andrew Miles first reached Brian's house, a dilapidated house, plaster peeling off the walls, a broken cot in the courtyard, and Brian's mother standing at the door. A weak, emaciated, sunken-cheeked woman, in whose eyes the grief of losing her son was sitting encamped. "Bibi, I am lawyer Andrew Miles. I am fighting the case of Jonas Reed. I want to talk to you about Brian," Andrew said in a soft tone. The woman looked at him in shock for a moment, then sighed. "Sir, it was written in our destiny to cry. Ask whatever you want. We are already lying down." Andrew sat on a chair in the courtyard and first offered condolences, then asked about Brian's life. The woman said that Brian was a decent boy. He used to work hard and support us. For some days there was a strange fear in his eyes. He often came home by changing routes, and sometimes he would mention some unknown danger. But he would not tell anything clearly. Andrew asked more questions about Brian's friends, about his routine, about the night he was killed. But the woman had only the same answers, which had already been given to the police. Nothing new was found. A shadow of disappointment came over Andrew Miles. But he knew that the real clue was hidden not in the court files, but in the faces that were silent due to fear. He left there and met some boys from Brian's neighborhood. Fear was clearly visible on their faces. At first, they hesitated to say anything. Then slowly, one of them told him that a few days before Brian's murder, some strangers had come to the neighborhood. Brian seemed confused by them. After that, he often felt scared. But who were these strangers? Everyone's lips were silent on this question. No name was found. No address was found. However, Andrew Miles did not give up. He spoke to nearby shopkeepers, watchmen, even rickshaw pullers. But either people did not know anything, or they were afraid to open their mouth.
Brian Carter's murder seemed to revolve around a conspiracy that was very deep, and whose fabric was reaching those corners of the city where even the reach of the law is weak. Late at night, Andrew Miles returned to his office, and the list of witnesses in front of him was still empty. He closed the case file, looked out the window at the darkened city, and thought that if no solid evidence was found by the next hearing, Jonas's life would be plunged into darkness. The files on his desk were getting higher and higher, but the truth was still hidden somewhere, as if he was sitting in a dark cave holding his breath. The tricks of the opposing lawyer had made Andrew Miles feel inferior. They would untie such knots of law that had no emotions, only evidence, and Andrew did not have a single particle of evidence. Jonas Reed would stand in the courtroom with the question in his eyes: is justice dead? Andrew Miles knew that the case was not fought only in the courtroom. Its fight continued in the streets, intersections, and dark alleys as well. He met Brian's mother again, but still, no new information was found. He questioned his sister, met his old friends, one of whom told him with a shudder that Brian had said 2 days before his death
that some people had come after him because he had seen something he shouldn't have seen. This sentence kept echoing in Andrew's mind. Some people have come after him. But who were these people? Why didn't Brian tell anyone about them? He tried to search the police records. When he reached the police station, the SHO looked at him coldly. "Look, lawyer, we don't even have enough time to get to the bottom of everything. It is enough for us that there are eyewitnesses against Jonas Reed. You can argue the rest in court." Andrew's blood boiled. Eyewitnesses? Which eyewitnesses? Those who themselves are taking refuge in lies? But the policeman's face remained cold. It was clear that the police were under some kind of pressure. Andrew himself started going to the narrow streets of the neighborhood. In the evening, when the sun was setting and the shadows of the walls began to lengthen and fall on the ground, he would wander through the same streets that Brian often came and went. Some people would peek through the doors. Some would tell half-truths and half-lies. One of them, an old man, said slowly, "Sir, it is not easy to know the truth here. Whoever sees does not live the next day." Hearing this sentence, Andrew's hair stood on end. The same thing had happened to Brian, too. He saw something, and then was killed. But the time in the court was getting shorter. In the previous hearing, the opposing lawyer had said this confidently before the judge. "Sir, this is a simple case. The accused has no strong defense, no evidence, and eyewitnesses clearly indicate that Jonas Reed was near the scene of the crime." Andrew Miles tried to answer, but his arguments were weak. Then the judge said in a heavy voice, "The next hearing is the last. If you do not present evidence on this, the bail will be confiscated and the verdict will be announced." At that time, the atmosphere in the courtroom seemed to have become silent. Emily Reed's hands started shaking. The children started crying, seeing their father, and fear settled in Jonas Reed's eyes. Andrew Miles could not sleep due to the onslaught of various thoughts. He reopened the files, saw the list of witnesses, saw the police report, but there was darkness everywhere. He felt as if some force was bent on suppressing this case. Then he decided that he would meet those people in those streets who are not mentioned in the law book. Those people who see everything but do not speak. Those informants, those old slums, those faces hidden in the semi-darkness. Perhaps the truth was hidden somewhere there. Thus, Andrew Miles turned to a new path. This path did not pass directly through the court, but led into the shadow of the city, where the light of the law was weak. He was now beginning to feel that this case was not just a murder. It was about the shadow of the city, which remains black even in the light of day. Brian Carter's murder was not the result of any coincidence. Rather, he had definitely seen something that became a threat to some people. But who were these some people? Where did they come from? And why was Brian's life taken? All this was a mystery until now. After the warning given by the judge at the previous hearing, Andrew could not find peace for a moment. Every day in court, the taunts of the opposing lawyer, the ambiguous testimonies of eyewitnesses, and the cold attitude of the police were increasing the pressure on him. The dark circles around Emily Reed's eyes were getting deeper. The children slept, worried about their father every day, and the people of the neighborhood whispered, "It is difficult for Jonas to escape now." But Andrew knew that this battle was not being fought to lose. He had now given up trust in the police. He decided to reach the truth himself. There was an area in the old part of the city, dirty drains, broken roads, dark slum streets. There lived people who saw everything but kept their mouths shut. Andrew contacted an old acquaintance of his, retired journalist Marsh, who knew a lot about the city's criminal network. Marsh said while exhaling cigarette smoke, "Lawyer! Everything has a price here, even silence. Brian probably saw the wrong thing at the wrong time. Now we have to know what he saw." With the help of Marsh, Andrew Miles reached the warehouse where Brian had seen suspicious people a few days before the murder. The warehouse was now deserted. Moss had settled on the walls, broken boxes inside, plastic bags, and bullet holes here and there. It was clear that something big had happened here, but there was no evidence left. Then, one night, Marsh informed Andrew that the people who were in the warehouse were related to the city's arms smuggling gang. Their leader's name is Robert, who bribes the police and intimidates witnesses. This news was nothing short of a bombshell for Andrew. If it was true, then Brian must have seen some of their secret transactions. Now the problem was that Robert and his men could spread fear even more than the law. Andrew Miles tried to reach a former associate of Robert, who had now left the world of crime and was living in hiding in a small town. The man was initially reluctant to say anything, but when Andrew assured him that his identity would be kept confidential, he reluctantly told him. Brian made a mistake that night. He had seen a stock of their weapons, which were brought for smuggling. Then Courtroom Carr's men decided that if this reached the police, the entire network would be destroyed. So it was considered necessary to remove Brian from the path. Now, I don't know whether Brian was killed by these people or if he had some other enemy. This confession was a great success, but the man was not ready to testify. He said, "I know. Robert's people kill whom and where. No one will even know, so I will not go to court." Meanwhile, in the court, the opposing lawyer said to the judge, "Sir, the defense lawyer is just wasting time. No evidence is being presented. The accused should be punished." The expression on the judge's face was stern. He wanted to pronounce the verdict at this hearing, but Andrew Miles had asked for a respite on the promise of providing evidence at the next hearing. The judge adjusted his glasses and said, "We need solid evidence at the next hearing. Otherwise, the court will not delay in giving its verdict." This warning stabbed Andrew Miles like a dagger in his heart, but he refused to give up. He searched the city newspapers for news of old crimes, secretly convinced some police officers, and started keeping a closer eye on Robert's network. One night, as he was reviewing these documents in his car, a motorcycle pulled up next to his. A masked man gently placed a piece of paper on the window and disappeared into the darkness.
The piece read, "If you want to know the truth, come to the old railway yard tomorrow night, but come alone." Andrew Miles read the piece, and a thrill ran through his veins. This could be a trap, and it could also be the door to martyrdom. The old railway yard was deserted. The wind was whistling on the broken tracks. Someone overturned an old tin can, and a loud noise echoed. Andrew's heart sank. A shadow appeared in the darkness. "I have the whole story of Brian's murder," the shadow said in a low voice. "But if my name comes to court, then I will be next." Andrew investigated according to the signs given by the shadow, and all the testimonies turned out to be lies. He had been misled. For the first time, he realized that this case was not just about a murder. It was about the fear of the city, which has put a lock on every tongue. The continuous drops of rain were washing the deserted streets of the city. The shutters of the shops on the roadside were closed, and the occasional sparks from the electric wires scattered above the dilapidated houses were making the atmosphere even more terrifying. Andrew's old Jeep was moving forward hesitantly through the streets. Jonas's case had now reached a decisive point. The judge's harsh words, the lack of evidence, and the fear of forfeiture of bail at the next hearing all weighed heavily on his conscience. But he knew that if the truth was not found, Jonas's life would be ruined, and his own reputation would also be affected if he lost the case. He decided to meet Brian's other relatives. He found out about Brian's distant aunt, so he reached there. The small house with a leaky roof outside and a dimly lit lantern inside showed poverty. Brian's aunt, a thin, frail woman with a wrinkled face, stood at the door. Andrew explained the purpose of his visit and asked permission to enter. "Ma'am, I'm Jonas's lawyer in the murder case of your nephew," he said softly. "I want to know the truth. Any clue, any testimony that can prove my client innocent." There were shadows of fatigue and pain in Brian's aunt's eyes. She sat silent for a while, then spoke softly. "Sir, we are poor people. My sister's son Brian was a laborer. He would return exhausted in the evening, bringing medicine for his mother. But that day was probably the last day of his life. My sister had told me that Brian had seen something,
something that even the mention of which is poisonous to people like us. He did not return that night. His body was found the next day, and a man named Jonas was accused. Andrew turned his face anxiously. Did Brian ever tell what he had seen? Whose name did he mention? The old woman shook her head in the negative. All he said was that some people were committing injustice, bloodshed, and he would testify against them. Then those people came after him. From here on, there were only tears, sobs, and an atmosphere of helplessness. Andrew returned from there disappointed, but a spark had lit up in his heart. He spent the next several days wandering around the city slums. Sometimes he would talk to Brian's friends, sometimes to his laborers. But every tongue was shut. A wall of fear stood on every side. People spoke in secret, afraid to mention names. An old laborer said only this: "Sir, these are people whose hands are very long. Taking the life of a poor person is not difficult for them." Brian had seen their crime, so he was killed. But no one will testify. Andrew's nights of sleep were shattered. The court date was approaching, and the real killers were roaming free. One evening, he reached the court's record room exhausted. While flipping through the files of old cases, he realized that Brian's murder was actually part of a big game. Influential people in the city were involved in this game. It is not difficult for them to make a poor man like Jonas a scapegoat. Then he met Jonas. The desolation was dripping from the door and wall of his house, and there was moisture of despair in Jonas's eyes. "Andrew, sir, did you find anything?" he asked in a trembling voice. Andrew hardened his heart and said, "Not yet, but I will not give up. I will find the real killer, even if I have to dig the ground." These days, Andrew's own life was also confused. His family complained that he was involved in the same case day and night, but his stubbornness was growing. He met a few honest police officers, tried to open secret files, but each time an obstacle arose. Then one day, he received news that some people were in a deserted warehouse on the night of Brian's murder. That warehouse was on the bank of a river far from the city. Andrew went there and investigated. The warehouse was also empty. Those people had also moved from there. There were bullet marks on the doors and walls of the warehouse. Old blood-stained bricks were still lying on the ground. Now the picture was slowly becoming clearer. But the evidence? Any witnesses? Any records? Anything that could stand up in court? This question was still there like a rock in front of Andrew. He would lie awake at night making plans, considering the possibilities. The only thing that echoed in his mind was to bring the real killer to light before it was too late. But this game, as he thought, was going to turn out to be much more dangerous than it was. Then an idea flashed through his mind like a needle, and he walked towards Brian's house. On his return, the shadows of thought had disappeared from his face. Perhaps he had found a clue. The crowd in the court today was much larger than before. Reporters, law students, relatives of both parties, all sat staring at the benches. There was a strange sensation in the air, as if a storm was about to strike. Jonas Reed was brought under police surveillance. The dark circles around his eyes and the hunched shoulders were telling that nights in prison take away the zest for life from a person. Brian Carter's mother was also present in the court, wearing a black dress and tear-stained eyes, her face lined with sorrow. The judge sat down on the chair, and a deep silence fell. "Lawyer Safai, do you have anything new?" the judge said in a serious voice. Andrew Miles slowly got up. The wakefulness of many nights, the rush of many days were written on his face. But today there was a sparkle in his eyes that had never been seen before. "Sir," he said in a slow but firm tone, "today I'm going to present the facts that will force this court to think 100 times before pronouncing the verdict." The prosecutor laughed. "I hope this is not a dream. Lawyer, we are all eager to hear your investigations. The judge motioned for the prosecutor to be quiet. Andrew took out some papers from his pocket, then slowly began to tell the court how he had investigated the last days of Brian Carter's life. Faced with the denial of witnesses, the indifference of the police, and the silence of some of Brian's old friends. Sir, I spent days and nights in the streets where Brian used to come. I spoke to the laborers who worked with him. I met his mother. But everyone said the same thing. Brian had said before he died that some people were after him because he had seen what he shouldn't have seen. There was a sudden commotion in the courtroom. I searched the police records, but there too it was pitch black. No one was telling who the real enemy was. But then, sir, he paused for a moment, and a silence fell over the courtroom. I secretly met with some people. One of them, fearfully, confessed that what happened the night of the murder he was not as simple as he seemed. The prosecutor immediately said, "This is just speculation, sir. Unless there is concrete evidence, all these stories are just a waste of time." Andrew turned to the prosecutor. "I have evidence, sir, but the time to present it has not come yet." The judge said, "You continue your story." Andrew went on to tell how he had spent many nights in secret meetings, how he had obtained recordings, written statements, and confessions from witnesses. With every word, the atmosphere in the court became more serious. "Sir, Jonas was accused of the murder because some witnesses present at the scene said that they saw Jonas there. But I have evidence that can prove my client innocent." The courtroom was suddenly silent. Brian's mother's face turned pale. Jonas's wife raised her hands in prayer. The judge said in a deep voice, "Lawyer Safai, the court cannot waste time. Tell me, who is the real killer?" Andrew stood silent for a few moments. He closed his file, then spoke slowly. "All the investigations I did regarding the arms smuggling gang led me to the road where the alley was blocked. The real killer, sir. He is Brian's cousin, a bad guy, a vagrant, and an agent of the arms smuggling mafia. He liked Brian's sister, but Brian was against this relationship. He killed his cousin to remove the road wall." A commotion erupted in the courtroom. Brian's mother screamed. Jonas's eyes lit up with surprise, and the police immediately sprang into action. The judge ordered that his name and record be produced. Andrew said softly, "His name is Harry Carter, and he is in the courtroom right now." A sensation spread through the courtroom. Harry suddenly got up from his seat and started to rush out. The police rushed to catch the cross, and the judge immediately acquitted Jonas with honor. At that moment, the rain began to pour heavily, as if the sins of the city were being washed away.